History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, we're winding back to one of the first episodes we did, all the way back to episode 16 in 2014, The Life and Afterlife of John Lennon.
That's quite the rewind.
Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. Our original Life and Afterlife episode featuring John Lennon was one of the first episodes we produced all the way back in December of 2014. We were intrigued not only by his life and death, but by the many ghost stories featuring him that popped up after his death. He has been gone for 44 years and was assassinated when we were both under the age of 10. We didn't realize at the time that we had lost a musical legend in an unexpected way outside of a hotel in New York City near Central Park. This was the Dakota, and we paid it a visit in 2020 when we visited New York City. Stories of it and the area around it being haunted by Lennon have been told for decades. Did Lennon sell his soul so the Beatles could attain their fame? Why was he gunned down? And is he still hanging around in the afterlife? Join us for the Life and Afterlife of John Lennon.
This Redux isn't going to be exactly the way we had planned it. As I was looking back over stuff, I was like, eventually we're going to get to doing the Life and Afterlife of John Lennon, and I was going to have Jerry Polly join us because Lennon meant a great deal to him. Obviously, that's not going to happen now, but we do suppose that the two have finally gotten to meet. Reams have been written about Lennon, so there's no way that we can cover everything in this podcast, but we definitely want to hit the highlights. And this starts with his birth on October 9th, 1940 in Liverpool, England. He's an October baby like me.
Oh.
He was given the middle name Winston in honor of Winston Churchill. His early life was not in a happy home. Lennon's parents were absent parents, and that's putting it nicely. His father was away all the time working as a merchant seaman, and his mother paid very little attention to him, eventually leading John's aunt to report the substandard care, and she was given charge of Lennon's care. In 1946, John's father attempted to take Lennon away to New Zealand, but his mother confronted his father and a scene no child should have to endure ensued. Lennon was forced to decide between his parents, and he chose his father. But as his mother walked away, he ran after her crying and he would not see his father again for 20 years. Although he had chosen his mother, it would be his Aunt Mimi who would raise him.
John Lennon's musical career began early. When he was a child, his uncle bought him a mouth organ, and his mother taught him to play the banjo and introduced him to the music of Elvis Presley, whom Lennon always looked to as inspiration, and he hoped one day to be as big as Elvis. He once said in 1980, "I made the decision at 16 or 17 that what I did, I wanted everybody to see. I wasn't going after the aestheticism, or the monastery, or the lone artist who supposedly doesn't care what people think about his work. I care a lot whether people hate it or love it, because it's part of me, and it hurts me when they hate it or hate me, and it's pleasing when they like it. But, as many public figures have said, the praise is never enough, and the criticism always bites deep. But stardom was far off at this point, and his life didn't show much hope for his dream to be fulfilled. Lennon was a troublemaker in school, the type of boy parents would warn their children to stay away from, and school labeled him as someone who would be a failure.
Elvis got the same kind of treatment as well. So it just goes to show those early judgments about people are not necessarily true. And maybe it spurs them on to do something great.
Indeed.
In 1956, Lennon's mother bought him his first guitar, a cheap Galatone Champion acoustic, and insisted that he leave the guitar at her house so that his musical ambitions would not be squashed. It seems that Aunt Mimi was not a fan of Lennon getting involved with music, and his declarations of being famous one day caused her to scoff. And while this act of motherly love towards John showed promise for their relationship, it would be obliterated when he was 17 and his mother was struck and killed by a car. The driver of the car was an off-duty police officer named Eric Clegg. I think that's how you say it, Clague, who was a learner driver. So I don't know why an off-duty police officer doesn't already have like a full-on driver's license. He was acquitted of all charges and his only punishment was a short suspension. Basically, his mother had come to his Aunt Mimi's house and she left with a friend of his and he walked her up the street and then they parted ways and he kept walking and then he heard tires screeching and a thud and he looked back and he realized that it was John's mother that was flying through the air. Just horrible. John was left devastated. He cried through the funeral and drank heavily and fought with all comers for the next 2 years. He wrote the songs Julia and Mother for her. Lennon said, "My mother was a housewife, I suppose. She was a comedian and a singer. Not professional, but she used to get up in pubs and things like that. She had a good voice. She could do K-Star. She used to do this little tune when I was just a 1 or 2-year-old. The tune was from a Disney movie. Want to know a secret? Promise not to tell. You're standing by a wishing well." And that made it into one of his songs, as a matter of fact. There were 5 women that were my family. 5 strong, intelligent, beautiful women, 5 sisters. One happened to be my mother. My mother just couldn't deal with life. She was the youngest and she couldn't cope with me, and I ended up living with her elder sister.
At this point, Lennon has lost his mother twice, and he seemed to be heading nowhere when he entered college. As a matter of fact, he was only accepted into art school after his Aunt Mimi intervened, and he was thrown out before he was able to graduate. Music was always there, though. Before college, Lennon had become interested in skiffle music. Skiffle arose in America during the 1920s from New Orleans Dixieland jazz, and it incorporated the use of mostly handmade instruments like guitars made from cigar boxes, and the melodies combined folk, blues, and jazz music all together. Skiffle jumped the pond and became very popular in Britain in the 1950s. Many small bands started as skiffle bands, and Lennon had one named the Quarrymen that he actually launched when he was only 15. Paul McCartney was at the second Quarrymen performance, and the two future legends met. The year was 1957, and the location was a small church hall stage in Woolton, Liverpool. National Museums Liverpool writes on their website of the moment, "That meeting didn't just change the lives of John and Paul. It was the spark that lit the creative touch paper on a cultural revolution that would reverberate around the world, reshaping popular music forever."
As fate would have it, John asked McCartney to join the band. The two then penned their first song, Hello, Little Girl. It seemed heavily influenced by the music of Buddy Holly. The earliest recording was made in 1960, and it went through changes through the years until its final version in 1962. George Harrison joined the group, and the name changed to Johnny and the Moondogs. Then along came Stuart Sutcliffe. And in 1960, the band changed their name again, and this one stuck, the Beatles. John and Stuart were having a late-night brainstorming session, and they came up with the name The Beatles. It was inspired by the Crickets, but Lennon wanted a name that could mean 2 things, and especially not just mean an insect. So he changed the B-E-E to B-E-A so that the name would also contain beat. He said of it, when you said it, people thought of crawly things, and when you read it, it was beat music. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'd never actually known where that came from.
I didn't either. The group got a booking agent and were set up with a gig in Hamburg. They had a problem, though. They had no drummer. For the first couple of years, they had just been floating various drummers through the group. Lennon recruited Pete Best, and they set off for Hamburg, where they would play in different clubs until 1962. Sutcliffe left the group at that time and later died of a brain hemorrhage. The Beatles recorded their first record and were discovered by Brian Epstein, who is responsible for formulating the group's image. Pete Best left the group and Ringo Starr joined, forming the Fab Four, the world would come to love. Lennon may have been unfocused in school, but he was driven when it came to music, and he was a taskmaster in the studio. Their first album, Please Please Me, contained 14 tracks and was recorded in 10 hours.
I can't even imagine that they got that recorded in 10 hours.
Crazy.
That's not even an hour per song.
The album featured 8 songs that McCartney and Lennon wrote together.
My, what a songwriting duo they were. Lennon met Cynthia Powell at art school in 1957. He was the bad boy to her good girl. She moved in different social circles, but she found herself drawn to the man who was always asking to borrow her pens and pencils. The two eventually began dating, but Lennon's jealousy would break them up. He got jealous when she danced with Sutcliffe one night and slapped her across the face so hard her head hit a wall.
Oh my word.
She broke up with him, and they remained apart for 3 months until he apologized profusely and begged her to come back to him. And I don't know why he did that, because he didn't really care for her that much, I would have to say. He was very inconsiderate of her. Lennon would treat her like crap most of the time, and often remarked that he didn't know what was wrong with him. So it's like he would treat her very poorly and then be like, why do I keep doing this? Well, obviously, a lot of it goes back to his childhood, I'm sure. He was always drunk or fighting. His good friend Tony Bramwell said of Powell, Cynthia was beautiful, physically and on the inside. Although she knew he, Lennon, was apt to find love on the road, she was totally dedicated to his success and extremely influential. He was insecure, and Cynthia was there to pump him up, to buttress sort of his weak side. So basically she knew he's going to be cheating on me when he goes on the road, but I want him to get on the road and get famous.
Towards the end of the Hamburg performances, Cynthia became pregnant, and so he insisted that they get married. It was a justice of the peace marriage, and Brian Epstein made the Lennons promise that they would tell no one about the marriage or the baby. The Beatles were just starting to get popular with the girls, and Epstein didn't want that ruined.
He even joined them on their honeymoon. Ew. So I'm like, why were you going with them on their honeymoon? And I read years ago, I don't remember all of it, but I know that there were insinuations that Epstein and Lennon had some kind of a relationship going on. I don't know if that's true. So I don't know if that influenced some of what was going on here. But yeah, I was like, how unfair to her. She's already having to deal with the fact that he's going to be on the road and then he's not supposed to tell anybody that he's married.
Yeah. Although Lennon would later come to be known as a man of peace, his violent ways continued in these early years, and he continued to not only fight with men, but he abused Cynthia. In 1963, she gave birth to their son, Julian. Lennon and fellow Beatles had already begun abusing drugs to help them stay awake on the road, and Lennon started using LSD after Julian was born. Cynthia would always say that this was the beginning of the end for their marriage. Lennon would later admit that he probably took LSD 1,000 times. The effect it had on him seemed to calm his inner demons, though. He became more peaceful and understanding, but that would come later. Dealing with the drugs, abuse, and finally discovering Lennon with another woman led Cynthia to ask for a divorce in 1968, and she was given custody of Julian. Julian and Lennon would have a strained relationship, with Julian becoming closer to McCartney, who wrote the song Hey Jude for him. Before John's death, the strained relationship became better, and Lennon guided Julian into his music career, and Julian sounds very much like his father. Despite the repaired relationship, Julian was left very little in Lennon's will.
And it's clear he named his son after his mother, but yeah, they just never had a very good relationship. This whole relationship was just so crazy for Cynthia. She actually had taken LSD as well. What happened is they went to this party at a friend's house, the way I read it, there was a dentist. So I don't know if it was a friend or what, but this dentist must have had LSD from something. I don't know if it was from his business. And he slipped it into everybody's drinks. And then they all went out on the town, and she had a really bad trip on it. So she's like, I never want to do that again. But Lennon really liked it. So he started doing it, and he convinced her to do it a couple more times, and she finally was just like, I am not doing this anymore. But clearly, he really enjoyed that. The other woman that John had been discovered with was, of course, Yoko Ono. She would not only mean the end of his marriage, but the end of the Beatles, too. And what happened with the divorce is that John and Yoko knew that it would look really, really bad to the public if it comes out that he was having this affair. So he actually had paid for Cynthia to go over to, I think it was Italy or something, with a friend, and he wanted them to try to hook up so that he could be like, she cheated on me, I want a divorce.
Oh,
so he was trying to preempt whatever she was going to do, but she got it in the end. And then he didn't want to give her as much money, and he ended up having to pay like twice as much as what he wanted. And so she did well after that. Now, Ono wasn't Lennon's only stray from his marriage. A lot of people might think that. Before the divorce, he confessed to Cynthia that he had slept with hundreds of groupies around the world. Ono and Lennon met in 1965, and she became pregnant in 1968 with their first child, which she miscarried shortly after Lennon's divorce was final. The circumstances of how Ono and Lennon met depend on whom you ask, but they always claimed it was an art exhibition of Ono's work. The couple married in 1969 in Gibraltar. Lennon said, "When I fell in love with Yoko, I knew, my God, this is different from anything I've ever known. This is more than a hit record, more than gold, more than everything." The relationship eventually led to the breakup of the Beatles. At least most fans blame Ono for the breakup. For all the incredible music the group created, one would think that the collaboration lasted a really long time. But the breakup in 1970 meant that they had been together for just a little over a decade. It shocks me to think that they were together for only that amount of time. And legend has it that it was at the Polynesian resort at Disney World where the final breakup of the Beatles took place. Lennon launched a successful solo career with Ono occasionally accompanying him on songs, much to our ears' dismay. The couple moved to New York in 1971 and lived at the St. Regis Hotel until they found a flat in Greenwich Village. They were robbed while living there, and so they moved to the Dakota in 1973 for more security. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
It was at this time that Lennon began an affair with the couple's personal assistant, May Pang, and Lennon eventually left Ono and moved to California with Pang. She was good for Lennon and helped him reestablish a relationship with his son Julian and with friends like his Beatles mates. His violent temper did cause him to nearly strangle her once, though. Lennon always referred to this time in his life as the lost weekend. The couple returned to New York and planned to buy a home. In 1975, Lennon agreed to a meeting with Ono, and great mystery surrounds what happened at this time. Many people, including Pang, suspect that Ono somehow managed to brainwash Lennon. 2 days after the Ono meeting, Lennon met up with Pang at a joint dental appointment. She had not seen or heard from him in those 2 days, and he announced that he was getting back together with Ono. Pang claims he seemed almost drugged and confused. She would continue to be his mistress. Later that year, Ono gave birth to a son, whom they named Sean. It had taken the couple 10 years to have a successful pregnancy. Lennon spent the next 5 years rearing Sean and staying out of the music business.
So he definitely did good with his second child and making sure that he took care of him. And I mean, they tried very, very hard to have him, so. It was also during the year 1975 that deportation proceedings finally ended against Lennon. He had been very politically active and protested the Vietnam War loudly. Ono and Lennon had staged bed-ins back in 1969, where they stayed in bed at a hotel and invited the press to ask them questions during the day. That same year, Lennon released the song Give Peace a Chance. His influence and criticism worried American President Richard Nixon, who was seeking re-election, and Nixon began deportation proceedings in 1972 against Lennon on grounds that he should have never been allowed to enter the country due to cannabis charges in Britain back in 1968. After Nixon resigned due to Watergate, President Gerald Ford stopped the proceedings and Lennon received his green card. It would later come out that the couple were tailed by the FBI for 3 years. I don't know, looking to get them on something, I guess. I mean, they definitely could have gotten them on some drug charges, but it was very important to John Lennon to be an American. He wanted to be here, and I partly think that is a little bit of what happened here with May Pang. Is that I don't think Ono brainwashed him. I think she threatened him. If you want to be able to live here in America, you better, stick with me and live here at the Dakota with me and set yourself up right and all this good stuff. So I think she just told him, you better or else. Because clearly he still was going to be with May Pang. He just couldn't move into a house with her and live with her.
In October of 1980, Lennon finally emerged from family life with a hit song, Just Like Starting Over. The single was ranked as the 62nd biggest song of all time by Billboard magazine in their Billboard Hot 100 chart in 2013. The album Double Fantasy was the 5th studio album by Lennon and Ono and was released in November to harsh criticism. Most critics dubbed it a big yawn. And then the end would come. On December 8th of that year, Lennon and Ono were taking a walk outside of their apartment at the Dakota when Mark David Chapman approached the couple from behind and shot Lennon 4 times in the back. It was later revealed that John's last words were, "I'm shot." He was dead on arrival at the hospital, and Ono had him cremated, and she later spread his ashes in Central Park. Chapman would claim that the idea of fame and notoriety that would come from killing someone like Lennon was irresistible. Chapman pleaded guilty and was sentenced 20 years to life. He remains in jail. His first parole hearing was after he had served 20 years. He has been denied parole 13 times. His 14th parole hearing is scheduled for August of 2025.
Lennon left a legacy that continues to this day, not only in the world of music, but in the world of political activism. Memorials and tributes to Lennon exist throughout the world. Across from the Dakota in Central Park is the Strawberry Fields Memorial. And we actually visited that and took lots of pictures.
Yes, we did.
But does something other than just a legacy continue on for John Lennon? Ono told People magazine in 1990, "The doctor came and handed me his things. I still didn't believe it. Then the doctor handed me John's wedding ring, and I knew. It was important that I give my permission to the hospital to announce John's death, but I couldn't bring myself to say yes right away. For that split second, I felt as though John would still be alive if his death was not announced. I still have dreams of John. His spirit is always with me. And perhaps his spirit really is still here. And there's much mystery, conspiracy, and supernatural activity that exists when it comes to Lennon."
One of the first mysterious circumstances is connected to Lennon's final album, Double Fantasy. People have claimed that the song Kiss, Kiss, Kiss on the album, sung by Yoko Ono, features her saying, "I shot John Lennon." It's a bizarre song because, well, it's Ono singing and just creepy and weird. We'll play that end clip here, back to back. I mean, we could kind of hear something like that, but the general consensus is that she is speaking Japanese and saying something like, "Deiti deiti moto suyokun deiti."
We have no idea if that's exactly how you're supposed to say it. We tried to look it up, so hopefully it was close.
Which means, hold me, hold me, hold me tighter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an EVP. If you're told what it says and you're listening for it, you might kind of hear it. Sounds like she says something like that, but I think it probably was that she was just saying something like this, because she clearly did not shoot him. So I don't know why it would have her saying that. It was just weird because it was before he was shot. So it's like, was this like a premonition or something else that was coming through? In the book, The Lennon Prophecy by Joseph Niezgoda, the Lennon prophecy is described as a pact made with the devil. The story goes that John Lennon wanted to be as big as Elvis, and so he sold his soul to the devil. The pact was made in 1960 and was to last for 20 years. Right after the pact was made, the Beatles performed at Litherland, England, and Beatlemania ensued, with the Beatles going on to international fame and fortune. Did Lennon really sell his soul? Some say the evidence is in the reaction of crowds to the Beatles. People appeared mesmerized and crazed when the group sang. Niezgoda also claims that Lennon told his friend Tony Sheridan that he had sold his soul. When Chapman killed Lennon, that was the devil collecting on the deal. Most people claim this is a conspiracy theory, and Beatlemania seemed pretty much like the real thing. And when you watch some of these women with a lot of the performers, like Elvis and everything,
Elvis too.
They all used to swoon and pass out and scream and lose their minds.
Throw their underwear.
Yeah. I don't know why people don't do it nowadays, but clearly that's not the case or whatever. I don't know if he did. It does seem like, wow, it would fall in line if he did, because it's like sell his soul, they get huge, and then, he's murdered in a horrible way. And the guy who wrote that book, a lot of people call it a bunch of hooey. He went back through all their songs and found all these little clues about how it was leading up to selling his soul to the devil and all that stuff. And I mean, I guess you can put anything into anything if you try.
Yeah, you could find evidence for anything you want to support what you want it to support. You just got to dig. As we've discussed on other episodes, sometimes departed people come back as an animal, like a butterfly or a bird. For Lennon, it seems as though the peacock, and more specifically, a white peacock, was his choice for animal afterlife appearances. Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison reunited to make a song in 1995 named Free as a Bird. They posed for a promotional picture outside, and at the last minute, a rare white peacock walked into the picture and was captured on film. McCartney said of the event. I said to the guys, "That's John. Spooky, eh?" It was like John was hanging around. We felt that way all through the recording. We put one of those spoof backwards recordings on the end of the single for a laugh, to give all those Beatles nuts something to do. Then we were listening to the finished single in the studio one night, and it gets to the end and it goes, Zurk, Noir, John, Lennon, Gork.
And it was like John Lennon.
Yeah, I haven't
Very
heard
weird.
it. And then he goes on to say, I swear to God, we were like, it's John. He likes it.
So you want to hear something synchronistic that might kind of blow your mind a little bit? That when you were reading that here, all of a sudden I remembered it or occurred to me. I have clients that are up in Mount Dora, and there is somebody who has a peacock up there. And every so often the peacock is like on the side of the road or crossing the road. I see it a handful of times, not even once a month. So I'm driving up there on Thursday, and I see this peacock is on the side of the road, and it's the male, and then there's a female peacock that's next to him. So the male's starting to cross the road, and I'm like, oh, come on.
And then I'm get
like,
to work.
Female, do not cross. And then I look over at the fence, and up on top of it, guess what's sitting there?
A white peacock?
A white peacock. Isn't that weird? I have never seen a white peacock up there before, because I was just like, wow, I almost wanted to stop and take a picture, but I needed to get going.
Yeah.
And then you were saying that, and I went, whoa, right before we do this, and I see a white peacock. Happens all the time here. And the white bird thing continued with Julian Lennon. Lennon had told his son Julian that if anything happened to him and he died, that he would return through a sign that would be a white feather. In 2007, Julian was working on the film Whale Dreamers in Australia about the plight of whales. He was working closely with the Aboriginal tribes. A tribe elder invited Julian to attend a ceremony one evening, and Julian was presented with a white feather there. Julian believes that this was the sign his father had promised him.
Liam Gallagher, the former lead singer of the group Oasis, claimed that John Lennon paid him a visit when he was 16 years old. In his story, Gallagher recounts, I was in Manchester at a friend's house having a sleep. I remember getting up and feeling really weird. I turned round, and there I was, lying on the bed, and I sort of fell back into my body. There was a presence there, and it was him, John Lennon.
So it was like he had an out-of-body experience, I guess.
He had said that Lennon is his spiritual guide and watches out for him. Gallagher also claims to be the reincarnation of Lennon, but he was born in 1972, so,
Yeah, how exactly did that work? Did his soul jump into you after you were born? May Pang has had experiences with Lennon's spirit. The Independent's Charlotte O'Sullivan interviewed May Pang in 2023. O'Sullivan writes, the last time John Lennon's one-time lover, May Pang, was visited by his ghost, it was while she was watching an episode of Law and Order, of all things. And now that makes us think we've been watching Resident Alien.
Yes.
That's like his favorite show. But when you talk about stuff like this, people think you're imagining it or are a little crazy, the 73-year-old says, so I don't ever talk about it. Pang was watching Law and Order and at the same time talking to John in her head. I was asking him, will things work out with the film? I wanted him to give me a sign. I looked up and a character says, it's whatever gets you through the night. Pang bounces in her chair, and I'm like, okay, got it. She says she felt Lennon's presence from the second he was shot dead outside the Dakota, but initially brushed it off. Then my friend calls and she says, John's been trying to reach you. I'm like, I know. She's like, well, try and answer him. Nowadays, Pang loves the little messages from Lennon. It's not necessarily every day that he comes to me, but it's like Julian says, he knows his father's thinking of him when he sees a white feather. We all have our little moments.
People claim to see the spirit of Lennon outside the Dakota, and he is occasionally seen across the pond with a woman whom people believe is his Aunt Mimi. A musician named Joey Harrow was walking with a friend near the Dakota, and he said they both saw him standing near the entrance with an eerie light surrounding him in 1983. Yoko Ono claims she saw Lennon sitting at his white piano, and that he told her he was still with her.
And she still lives at the Dakota, so that's why he's haunting their flat still, apparently. The Dakota has a history of being haunted, so Lennon just may have joined the crying lady ghost he said he once saw there. Is the legacy of John Lennon more than just his memory? Is the spirit of John Lennon still here among the living? That is for you to decide. Well, maybe not the nicest guy, but some great music that we got out of him.
Indeed.
I want to thank you guys for joining us on this Redux. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.